Well, we're seeing more economic fallout from the situation in Yemen. Oil prices initially jumping on fears of a wider Middle East conflict. Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate have both risen significantly. As you can see, Brent crude sitting up 1.2%. Look, shipping rates for key global routes have spiked since the Red Sea attacks began. The supply chain disruption will reportedly cause Tesla to suspend production next month in Germany. We've got Ian Bremmer joining us now, who is the president of the Eurasia group. He joins us from New York. Ian, great to have you on this story. And what a time to be speaking right now. I mean, we've seen these disruptions in the Red Sea. We've seen vessels, deviate and going to, points where they haven't really been used before, Cape of Good Hope, for example. But here's the reality. You've got the Houthi attacks on vessels. You've got the U.S. allies striking back. Then you've got promises of retaliation. The question of real spillover and escalation that was, there was a big hope that would be avoidable. Now, probably very likely.
That's certainly our perspective. Back when we put the top risks together for 2024 on Monday, Middle East was number 2. And the reason for it is because we thought it was virtually certain that the war would escalate substantially over the coming months. The Houthis are one piece of that, but sadly not the only piece. It's also the Shia militants in Iraq and Syria. It's also the Northern Front in Hezbollah and the Israeli desire to degrade their capabilities and push them back from the border. And it's also the radicalization of Muslims, not just in the region, but around the world on the back of all of that violence. I mean, if it were just a matter of us sitting here today and talking about the Houthis and the American strikes and nothing else, I would feel more comfortable with this conversation, but it's not. And it's not in the context of an Israel and a U.S. supporting it that are very, very isolated on the global stage. And that makes the Israelis feel like they have to do everything they can to reduce any external threats now. So everything is still pointed towards escalation at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. What a way to start the year. And of course, with the risks that you've tabled. Look, behind the Houthis, of course, we know is Iran. We've established that. There hasn't really been an appetite in the past for, a real confrontation between the US and Iran. Is there a likelihood that that could be playing out? Should we be watching very closely in terms of direct military, confrontation between Israel and Iran or the US and Iran?
It's obviously a concern. I don't think it's imminent. I think we're still several steps of escalation away from when we need to say this could happen at any moment. But, saying that the Iranians don't have an appetite for escalation and conflict really flies in the face of the fact that they are providing the weapons systems for all of these actors to attack the United States, its allies, and civilian shipping. They're the ones that are putting U.S. servicemen and women in the region directly at risk. If the Iranians wanted to cut this off, they could. They're not doing it. And so clearly the Iranians are prepared to accept a fair amount of risk in this environment, and they assume that Biden is not going to react, maybe differently than Trump, for example, when he ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. Now, of course, in relatively short order, Trump is likely to get the Republican nomination. And we already see former Secretary of State and CIA Director Mike Pompeo likely to play a role in any Trump administration, saying we need to be hitting the Iranians. It's not about the Houthis. Trump's going to be saying that as well. So if that's the Republican Party platform, it puts Biden under more pressure in that direction. The Israelis also, as they start hitting more proxies in the region, as they start going after Hezbollah beyond just skirmishing, the possibility that Iran would hit back is not zero. And so again, I hope that that's not where we're heading. I wouldn't bet that we're going to have a direct fight between the U.S. and Iran right now, but absolutely over the last week, the potential for that have become more real.
Yeah. I mean, really interesting probabilities you're playing out there. But look, I want to talk about what we're seeing in the Red Sea in terms of shipping routes and what this means for oil prices, and whether we should be pricing in a very different scenario than what we were anticipating towards the end of 2023. This is perhaps one of the biggest risks now facing commodities as well as the oil market as well. What are you pricing in right now?
So I'm not pricing in anything, right? I mean, so I'm not having to deal with this on an investor basis, but I think the reason why prices are still well below their Russian invasion highs are because the Americans are producing record amounts and because Chinese demand is really low. Plus, we also have the Saudis and OPEC with more than 1 million barrels of oil production a day that they have kept off the markets because they're concerned that the economy just is too anemic in 2024. So, in other words, there is a fair amount of flex in the system that is keeping those prices low despite the geopolitical risks that are very real. The thing that would change that would not be more U.S. strikes against Yemen, and I don't expect the Houthis are going to be taking big strikes on energy facilities because they don't want to antagonize the Saudis and the Emiratis directly. They want this fight to be about the United States and Israel. They want the Gulf states on the sidelines. So the risk here is if it blows into U.S. versus Iran or Israel versus Iran, and then you have $150, $200 oil. Then you have a global recession. Then Biden loses, right? Absolutely. And I don't think that that is intended by anyone right now, but it's absolutely possible. U.S. strikes in Yemen. What if you hit a bunch of IRGC forces? And what if they, with some autonomy from the Iranian government, decide they're going to strike back? There are lots of ways that we can see this happening, even if it's not the intention. And so should some of that be priced in? Yeah, probably some of that should be priced in.